Colorado Rockies, 1878. The sharp whistle of mountain wind masked the sound of bolt cutters slicing through the paddock gate as three figures led a magnificent chestnut mare away from the solitary cabin perched on Raven's Ridge. "She'll never catch us now," one muttered, securing the nervous horse to a lead rope. "Not with the pass snowed in." What the Keller brothers didn't realize, what would ultimately become their death sentence, was that the slender figure watching from the shadowed window wasn't merely another struggling widow trying to maintain her small homestead in this unforgiving mountain wilderness. For nearly 2 decades, Sophia Blackwood had been the most feared tracker in the Colorado Territories, known in hushed whispers as the Mountain Ghost. A woman who could outrun horses across treacherous terrain and track men for hundreds of miles without rest or hesitation. The first light of dawn painted the rugged Colorado landscape in hues of violet and gold as Sophia Blackwood stood motionless in the doorway of her modest mountain cabin. At 43, her face bore the weathered lines of someone who had spent a lifetime under the harsh mountain elements, but her eyes remained sharp as an eagle's, tracking the distant shadows that marked the Keller gang's retreat. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Her raven black hair, streaked with silver at the temples, was pulled back in a tight braid, and her calloused hands clenched into fists at her sides. Ember, her prized chestnut mare and the last gift from her late husband Daniel, was now disappearing around the bend of the mountain trail. The horse wasn't just an animal. She was Sophia's lifeline, her only means of transporting supplies across miles of treacherous mountain passes, and her last connection to the life she'd built with Daniel before the mountain fever took him 3 winters ago. Sophia's breath formed small clouds in the frigid morning air as anger and determination crystallized in her chest. The Keller brothers had stolen from the wrong woman. She moved with practiced efficiency, gathering essentials for the pursuit. From beneath the loose floorboards near the hearth, she retrieved a worn leather pouch containing tracking tools she hadn't touched in years. A small brass compass with a cracked face but perfect needle, a weathered map marked with hidden passes and shelters throughout the territory, and a curved hunting knife with intricate carvings on the bone handle. Mrs. Blackwood. Sheriff Miller's voice carried up the snow-dusted path, followed by the labored breathing of his horse struggling up the steep incline. "Heard someone rode through town before dawn. Kellers were asking about your place yesterday." 3 riders. "I took Ember," Sophia stated flatly, securing a small canteen to her belt as the aging lawman dismounted, his weathered face creased with concern as she emerged from her cabin. "Damn those Keller boys," Miller spat, watching as Sophia checked the soles of her unique footwear, specially designed moccasin-style boots with layers of treated deer hide and rabbit fur. "They've been hitting homesteads from here to the Dakota border, already killed 2 men at Summit Creek last month." He hesitated, studying her preparations with growing unease. "Mrs. Blackwood, I strongly advise against whatever you're thinking. These men are killers." A ghost of a smile touched Sophia's lips. "I appreciate your concern, Sheriff." Miller studied her carefully. They'd known each other for many years, since before she'd married Daniel and settled on Raven's Ridge. "Been a long time since anyone's whispered that name," he said quietly. "The Mountain Ghost. That life is behind me." Sophia secured her hunting knife to her thigh, concealed beneath her skirt. "But they didn't steal from the Mountain Ghost. They stole from Sophia Blackwood. That makes it personal." Miller shifted uncomfortably in the ankle-deep snow. "The Kellers have hideouts scattered across 3 territories, network of lookouts in every town. They've evaded every posse sent after them." "Posses make noise, Thomas," Sophia replied, pulling rawhide laces tight around her ankles. Follow predictable trails. I'm just one woman, and I haven't forgotten how to move silently. At least let me send telegrams to the other sheriffs. Organize a proper— No, Sophia cut him off firmly. By the time your telegrams are answered, they'll have crossed Ember into Utah or sold her to some unsuspecting rancher. This needs to be handled now, and it needs to be handled my way. Miller recognized the steel in her tone, the same quiet certainty she'd carried in her tracking days when she'd find men that had eluded every lawman in the territory. They're watching the obvious routes, he warned. Probably have men posted at key passes and waterholes. Let them watch the passes, Sophia replied, taking a final inventory of her sparse provisions. I learned to track in these mountains long before the Kellers thought to hide in them. She stepped out into the morning sun, her eyes already reading the subtle signs in the snow that most would miss, the depth of hoof prints indicating Ember's resistance, the pattern of the horse's gait, the small scraps of evidence the gang had unwittingly left behind. I've known you nearly 18 years, Sophia, Miller said, his voice dropping. Known you since you were that half-wild girl the Ute found and raised after the Blackfoot raid that took your parents. I saw what tracking those men did to you. Sophia's eyes hardened at the mention of her past. This isn't about revenge, Thomas. Then, what is it about? Survival. She gestured to her small homestead. Without Ember, I can't haul supplies from town, can't transport firewood and game. Everything I've built here dies. She paused, looking toward the distant mountains. Daniel wanted this place to thrive. I won't let it wither because of men like the Kellers. Miller studied her for a long moment. There was something both familiar and foreign in Sophia's demeanor. The focused hunter he'd known years ago, tempered by the steady homesteader she'd become. Give me 3 days, she told him. If you haven't heard from me by then, send your telegrams, but you won't need to. These men, Sophia, Miller said quietly, they're killers. Cold-blooded. No, Thomas. Her voice carried the chill of a mountain night. They're thieves who haven't met the right hunter yet. She knelt, gently touching the disturbed snow where Ember had been led away. But they're about to. As Sophia set off across the frost-glazed landscape, Miller watched her figure grow. Smaller against the vast terrain, her stride was already changing, transforming from a homesteader's practical gait to something more fluid, more purposeful, the legendary pace that had earned her the name the Mountain Ghost. The Keller brothers thought they'd stolen a horse from a widow's mountain cabin. Instead, they'd awakened something far deadlier, a legend they'd thought was just campfire stories. The Mountain Ghost was back on the hunt, and this time it wasn't about bounties. This was about justice, survival, and the bond between a woman and the last connection to the life she'd built from nothing. As Sophia crested the first ridge, her eyes picked up signs invisible to others. A broken pine needle, disturbed rocks, the subtlest impression of hooves in the hard-packed snow. The mountains were speaking to her in a language few remembered, telling a story of arrogant men who believed their tracks would vanish like morning mist. They were about to learn why. Even the most hardened outlaws had once checked their back trail and slept with one eye open when word spread that the Mountain Ghost was hunting them. Because Sophia Blackwood hadn't just been good at tracking outlaws, she had been a phantom across the mountains, a whispered name that made killers tremble, a hunter who could run for days without rest and appear like a mirage where least expected. Now, as she settled into the ground-eating lope that had made her legendary, Sophia felt the familiar focus settling over her, the quiet certainty that had defined her former life, sharp as ever. The Keller gang had a significant head start, but they were riding stolen horses through a country they barely knew. She had been born to this harsh land, had learned its secrets from the Ute who'd found her half dead beside her slaughtered parents. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story. Every rocky outcropping, every hidden spring, every subtle change in the mountain wind, they all told a story to those who knew how to listen. The hunt was on, and this time there would be no bounties claimed, only justice served beneath the unforgiving Colorado sky. The midday sun blazed across the snow-covered peaks as Sophia moved with the rhythm of the land, her pace unbroken since dawn. Where others would have sought shelter and rest, she pressed forward, her eyes continually scanning the terrain. The distinctive gait of Ember's hoofprints told her the mare was still resisting her captors, creating a trail clearer than the Keller. Gang realized. At a rocky outcropping, Sophia paused, noting where the gang had stopped briefly. Discarded cigarette papers caught in a scrub pine, still fragrant enough to be from this morning, a coffee tin tossed carelessly aside. She knelt, touching the disturbed snow with experienced fingers. "One of the riders is heavier than the others," she murmured, his horse struggling under the weight, leaving deeper impressions. The second rider's horse has a unique pattern too. Its gait, slight favoring of the right foreleg. The third keeps Ember close, probably using a lead rope. She shook her head with disgust. Sloppy. She noted how they'd made no effort to conceal their trail. Either they didn't expect pursuit, or they didn't fear it. Both assumptions would prove fatal. Sophia removed her worn boots, examining the specially designed soles. The ute had taught her this trick, layers of deer hide and rabbit fur that cushioned her steps while protecting against the biting cold and sharp rocks. These boots had carried her thousands of miles across the territories, earning her the name that still echoed in frontier legends. A distant plume of smoke caught her attention, a campfire perhaps, or a chimney from one of the scattered homesteads. Through narrowed eyes, she recognized the location. Old Man Jenkins' hunting cabin near Thunder Ridge. The reclusive trapper rarely ventured out in winter, preferring to maintain his lifelong feud with civilization from a comfortable distance. She considered whether to approach the cabin for information. Movement along the tree line caught her attention. A lone figure on horseback, moving carefully along the ridge. Through the clear mountain air, she recognized William Two Hawks, the Ute medicine man's son, who now worked as a scout and occasionally carried messages between isolated settlements. Sophia stepped into view, raising a hand in greeting. William guided his pinto toward her, surprise evident on his weather-beaten face. "Mrs. Blackwood, what brings you so far from your cabin alone?" His eyes took in her tracking gear and the determined set of her jaw. "Keller gang," she stated simply. "3 riders took Ember before dawn." William's expression darkened. "Bad men. Very bad. They shot at my cousin near Eagle Pass last month when he refused to sell them horses." Sophia nodded grimly. "Which route have they been taking after their raids?" William considered this, his eyes scanning the distant horizons as if reading the landscape itself. "North through Devil's Backbone, then east toward the old mining camps," he said finally. "The abandoned places where no one asks questions." He hesitated, studying her with newfound understanding. "You track them, alone?" "I must," Sophia replied simply. William leaned forward in his saddle. "There is talk. The Kellers, they're not just stealing horses anymore." "What kind of operation?" "Rumors say they supply remounts for bank robbers across the territory, fresh horses stationed at strategic points for quick escapes." He lowered his voice, though no one was within miles. "Some say they've got a man inside the U.S. Marshal's office. That's how they stay ahead of the law." Sophia absorbed this information, adding it to her mental map. "Has anyone in particular been asking questions about my homestead recently? About Ember?" William's eyes widened slightly. "Come to think of it, there was a man in Silverton last week, well dressed for these parts, asked specific questions about prized horses in the area." He frowned. Mentioned your mare by name. Did he now? Sophia said, her voice cooling. Anything else I should know? William shifted uncomfortably on his mount. They weren't just asking about horses. Wanted to know about you specifically. If you lived alone, if you had family nearby or regular visitors. His eyes met hers. And one more thing, Mrs. Blackwood. The man had a distinctive scar across his face, from forehead to jaw. Reminded me of something I hadn't thought about in years. Sophia went still. What's that? Stories about the mountain ghost. How? She marked the leader of the Blackfoot raiding party that killed her family, cut him across the face before he escaped. William studied her carefully. That was you, wasn't it? Before the Ute found you. Sophia didn't answer directly. This man, with the scar, did he give a name? Called himself Johnson, but one of his companions slipped up calling him Keller. A cold certainty settled in Sophia's chest. Not one of the gang, the leader. William nodded slowly. Seems your mare wasn't just another theft of opportunity. They came looking specifically for your horse. He hesitated. And maybe for you. Sophia processed this revelation, the pieces shifting in her mind. Thank you, William. I'd appreciate it if you'd keep our meeting between us. Of course. He gathered his reins. Be careful, Mrs. Blackwood. The mountain ghost was a legend, but legends don't stop bullets. As William's horse carried him toward his destination, Sophia altered her course slightly. If Jacob Keller himself had been asking questions, this wasn't just about stealing a valuable horse. The coincidence was too great. The leader of the gang, bearing the same distinctive scar she'd given a Blackfoot raider 15 years ago. Memory surfaced like a mountain avalanche. A young Sophia, barely 17, watching from a hidden space beneath the cabin floor as Blackfoot raiders slaughtered her homesteading parents, the moment she'd lunged out with her father's hunting knife, catching the leader across the face before being knocked. Unconscious, the days of delirium that followed, as she staggered through the wilderness until the Ute found her, more dead than alive. Sophia pushed the memories aside. Speculation wouldn't change her immediate goal, recovering Ember. But it added urgency to her pursuit. If Keller was indeed the Blackfoot raider she'd marked all those years ago, he wouldn't have forgotten either. The terrain gradually changed as Sophia moved north, snow-covered meadows giving way to the distinctive red rock formations of the region, locals called Devil's Backbone, a treacherous ridge of wind-carved spires stretching 20 miles along a natural watershed. Few travelers attempted crossing it directly. Most circled around, adding days to their journey. Sophia went straight, in her practiced eye, finding natural pathways invisible to casual observation. The Ute had shown her these routes, ancient trails used by their people for generations. As she navigated a particularly narrow passage, fresh signs caught her attention. Cigarette ash, not yet scattered by wind, boot prints showing wear. Someone had dismounted, perhaps to rest horses or check their bearings. Hours old, not days. The gang was moving slower than she'd anticipated, likely believing themselves safe in this treacherous terrain. At a small, seep spring hidden among the rocks, Sophia found more telling evidence. Ember had pulled free briefly, her distinctive hoofprints showing a short burst of freedom before being recaptured. The ground told the story clearly. A struggle, a man thrown to the ground, angry bootprints circling in frustration. "Good girl," she whispered with fierce pride. Ember was making their journey difficult, just as she'd trained her to do with strangers. By late afternoon, Sophia reached a vantage point overlooking a vast expanse of the territory. In the distance, thin smoke rose from what appeared to be an abandoned mining claim, the Broken Promise Mine, closed after a deadly collapse 5 years earlier. A strategic location offering shelter while being officially uninhabited. Through the clear mountain air, she could make out movement. Horses in a makeshift corral, men moving between rough structures, too far to identify individuals, but enough. To confirm her suspicions, the Keller operation was larger than simple horse thieving. The number of animals in that corral suggested systematic acquisition and holding. As Sophia assessed her approach options, the sound of approaching hoofbeats made her melt into the shadows of a large boulder. A lone rider appeared on the trail, below, moving at an easy pace. The man wore the distinctive badge of a deputy U.S. Marshal, but something about his manner raised Sophia's suspicions. He rode directly toward the abandoned mine, with the confidence of someone expected, not someone investigating. "Their man inside the marshal's office," she murmured, watching as he was greeted without challenge at the camp's perimeter. Sophia settled deeper into her observation point, prepared to watch and learn. The sun would set in a few hours, bringing the merciful cold of the mountain night. While most travelers would make camp, she would continue. The night had always been her ally, and her Ute-trained eyes could read signs by starlight that others couldn't see at noon. The Keller gang believed. The harsh terrain and their inside connections made them untouchable. They were about to learn that the mountains had a long memory, and the mountain ghost had an even longer one. Twilight painted the mountains in deepening shades of purple as Sophia maintained her vigil above the Broken Promise mine. The camp below had come alive with activity, men moving between buildings, horses being tended, supplies unloaded from pack mules. By her count, there were at least 12 men, far more than the Keller gang's known numbers. The corrupt deputy marshal had joined what appeared to be a strategy meeting in the largest structure, formerly the mine's office. Through her father's old brass spyglass, Sophia studied the gathering. 5 men clustered around a table spread with what looked like maps. At the center stood a tall figure whose bearing commanded attention, Jacob Keller himself. Even at this distance, the scar across his face was visible, a pale slash against sun-darkened skin. Sophia's hand unconsciously moved to the hunting knife at her thigh, the same blade that had marked him all those years ago, though neither had known then that fate would bring them full circle. As darkness fell completely, small fires sprang up around the camp. Sophia used the deepening shadows to shift position, working her way silently toward the abandoned structures on the mine's periphery. The skill with which she moved, each footfall precisely placed, her silhouette never breaking the skyline, reflected years of Ute training enhanced by natural talent. Near an outlying shed, Sophia paused, hearing voices. 2 men, their silhouettes backlit by a distant fire. 8 more horses coming tomorrow, one said, striking a match against his boot. Crawford's bringing them from the Preston auction. That banker fellow coming too? The second man asked. Yep. Bringing them papers for the mining claims. Once they're registered, we control the access to 3 valleys. Smart play. Can't mine silver without access. Keller's thinking bigger than horses now. This is about controlling the whole damn territory. The first man laughed low. U.S. Marshals. Office in his pocket, banks handling the money, and us running the operation on the ground. Next year we'll be legitimate businessmen. What about the widow's mare? Worth all this trouble? That mare? It's the bloodline Keller wants. Fastest. Horse in the territory, perfect for our remount stations. The man's voice dropped, but Sophia's keen hearing caught his words. Plus, it's a personal matter between Keller and her. The way I hear it, something from years back. Catherine waited until they moved on before slipping closer to the main structures. Ember would be in the corral with the other stolen horses, but approaching directly would be suicidal with so many men about. She needed to understand more about their operation first. Weaknesses, patterns, schedules. A flicker of movement near the main building caught her attention, a slender figure emerging from the shadows. Not one of the gang, but a woman in worn frontier dress. Sophia watched as she carried water buckets toward the bunkhouse, her movements suggesting reluctance or fear. Changing course, Sophia ghosted through the darkness, intercepting the woman behind a stack of mining equipment. She clamped one hand over the woman's mouth before she could cry out. "I mean no harm," Sophia whispered. "I'm looking for a stolen horse." The woman's terrified eyes gradually steadied as Sophia slowly removed her hand. "You're her," the woman whispered. "The one they're talking about, the tracker. Who are you?" "Hannah Morgan. They raided our supply store last month and killed my husband when he resisted." Her voice was hollow with grief. "Brought me here to cook and clean for their operation." "I'm sorry about your husband," Sophia said softly. "Are there others like you?" "Another woman from a raided homestead. They keep us separate, thinking we might plot something." Hannah glanced nervously toward the main building. "You shouldn't be here. Keller has men everywhere, and that marshal, Deputy Rawlins, he brings information, warns them about Lawman's movements. But he's not the only one. There's talk of a banker involved, someone with political connections." Sophia processed this information. "My mare, chestnut with a white blaze. Where are they keeping her?" "The special stock is in the separate corral, behind the assay office. Your Ember is there, but—" Hannah hesitated. "What?" "They can't handle her. Already thrown 2 men. Keller's furious, wants to break her personally." Pride mingled with concern in Sophia's chest. "When?" "Tomorrow. Some big meeting is happening. Territorial officials arriving with the banker." Hannah clutched Sophia's arm suddenly. "There's more. They've got a boy." Sophia went still. "A child?" "Son of the sheriff from Silver Creek, taking him to force his father to look the other way on some land deals, keeping him in the old foreman's quarters." This changed things. Sophia had come for her horse, but a child in danger altered priorities. "How many men guard him?" "Just one, usually. They don't expect anyone to know he's here." Hannah's eyes pleaded. "His name is James. He's only 9. Sophia made a quick decision. "Can you get a message to the hunting camp in the foothills, the Ute settlement led by Running Elk?" Hannah's eyes widened. "The Indian camp? I might. Sometimes they let me gather herbs near the ridge. Tell Running Elk that the mountain ghost calls for the old alliance. He'll understand." Hope flickered in Hannah's eyes. "You know the Ute?" "They raised me after my family was killed. Running Elk was like an uncle." Understanding dawned on Hannah's face. "The stories about the mountain ghost being raised by Indians are true. And now tell me everything about the camp's routine. Guard changes, who goes where, when they sleep." As Hannah detailed the operations pattern, Sophia built a mental map. The camp followed military-like precision, unusual for outlaws. Guards changed every 4 hours, the horses were checked at dawn and dusk, supply wagons arrived on specific days, the corrupt deputy marshal brought information weekly. "Tomorrow's meeting is important," Hannah finished. "Some mining commissioner, the banker from Denver, and that sheriff. Something about mining rights and land claims." "Where is it happening?" "Main building, midday." Hannah glanced toward the camp. "I should go. They'll miss me." Sophia nodded. "If you can reach Running Elk, do it. If not, stay safe. When this is over, I'll make sure you and the other woman are returned home." As Hannah hurried away, Sophia retreated to higher ground, processing what she'd learned. The Keller operation wasn't just about stolen horses. It was a sophisticated criminal enterprise with political connections aimed at controlling the region's resources. The stolen horses, including Ember, were just one piece of a larger scheme. More troubling was the kidnapped boy. Sophia couldn't leave a child in danger, even if it complicated her recovery of Ember. The Ute had taught her that protecting the innocent came before personal concerns. She made her way to a vantage point overlooking both corrals. In the smaller one, separated from the main herd, stood Ember, her proud silhouette unmistakable even in darkness. The mare paced restlessly, refusing to settle like the other horses. "Soon," she whispered, though the wind carried her words. "Away!" Sophia settled into a protected hollow among the rocks, preparing for a few hours of rest before the pre-dawn hours when the camp would be at its most vulnerable. Tomorrow would require all her skills, not just tracking and moving unseen, but strategy and timing. The Keller gang had created something more dangerous than a simple outlaw operation. They were building a power structure that could corrupt the entire territory, using violence and political manipulation to control land, mining rights, and transportation. As she closed her eyes for a brief rest, Sophia's mind worked through possibilities and contingencies. Getting to Ember would be challenging enough. Adding a child's rescue complicated matters exponentially. But the presence of important visitors tomorrow offered opportunities as well as obstacles. Sometimes the most effective strategy wasn't the direct approach. The Ute had taught her that too. The false dawn cast ghostly light across the mountain landscape as Sophia moved through the shadows surrounding the Broken Promise mine. She'd rested just enough to restore her energy while remaining alert, a skill honed during years of tracking dangerous men across unforgiving terrain. Now she circled the outskirts of the camp, studying guard positions and movement patterns. 2 men guarded the main entrance, slumped and drowsy after the long night watch. A third patrolled the perimeter with a lantern, his circuit predictable to the minute. The separate corral where Ember was kept had its own guard, a young man who repeatedly checked his pocket watch, eager for his replacement. Most revealing was the position of a sharpshooter on the roof of the old assay office, a Springfield rifle across his lap as he surveyed the approaches. Keller was expecting trouble, though perhaps not from a single woman who could move like mountain mist. Sophia paused at a ridge overlooking the eastern approach to the mine. If Hannah had managed to get word to Running Elk, there might be a signal. Before full sunrise, the Ute never attacked directly. Their way was subtlety and distraction, creating opportunities rather than confrontations. A faint flicker of light caught her attention, 3 quick flashes from a distant hill. Pause, then 2 more. The old sign, one she hadn't seen in years. Running Elk had received the message and acknowledged the alliance. Sophia felt momentary relief, knowing she wasn't entirely alone. She continued her circuit, eventually finding the foreman's quarters, where the boy was supposedly held. Through a grimy window, she could make out a small figure curled on a cot, a man dozing in a chair nearby. James, the sheriff's son, appeared unharmed, but clearly frightened even in sleep. As she watched, the camp began stirring with early morning activity. Men emerged from bunkhouses, fires were stoked, coffee brewed. The operation ran with military precision, another sign of Keller's unusual leadership. Most outlaw gangs were chaotic, but this one operated like a well-oiled machine. Sophia retreated to higher ground as full daylight approached, unwilling to risk detection. From her vantage point, she observed supply wagons being prepared, horses tended, and what appeared to be preparations for the important meeting later, tables and chairs arranged in the main building, documents spread out, maps pinned to walls. By mid-morning, new arrivals began appearing. A well-dressed man in an expensive suit accompanied by 2 armed guards, his bearings suggesting both wealth and authority. This would be the banker Hannah had mentioned. Shortly after came another wagon bearing official territorial government markings, from which emerged a portly man wearing a badge of office, some kind of commissioner. Most interesting was the arrival of a private coach under heavy guard. 4 armed men escorted a slender, distinguished gentleman whose bearing spoke of authority. The deference shown by others confirmed this must be someone of significant importance. "Planning quite the gathering, aren't you, Keller?" Sophia murmured to herself, counting nearly 20 men now in the camp. Whatever transaction was occurring today involved more than simple horse theft or local corruption. This had territorial implications. A noise behind her froze Sophia in place, the subtle displacement of a small stone. She reached for her knife without turning, muscles tensed for conflict. "The eagle soars, but the mountain remains," came a soft voice in the Ute language. "The ghost walks without disturbing the snow," Sophia responded in the same tongue, relaxing slightly as she recognized the traditional greeting. She turned to find a young Ute warrior, perhaps 20, his clothing a mixture of traditional and frontier styles. "I am Swift Arrow," the man said quietly in English, "Running Elk's son. He sends me with eyes to see and ears to hear." "I'm grateful," Sophia replied. "Your father was my teacher when I had lost everything." Swift Arrow nodded. "He still speaks of you, still the mountain ghost, the pale girl who ran like wind and moved like shadow." His eyes held respect beyond his years. "Our watchers observe all approaches to this place. They are many and armed well. Too many for direct action. Numbers can be a weakness as well as a strength," Sophia agreed. "Tell me what your people have observed." Swift Arrow settled beside her, pointing out details Sophia had missed. A hidden cache of weapons in an abandoned shaft. The pattern of patrols that changed subtly each day. The way certain men deferred to others, indicating a hierarchy beyond the obvious. "The important men arriving," Swift Arrow continued. "They bring papers for mining rights along Silver Creek. The banker holds debts of many ranches there. If they control the water access, they control everything. Cattle can't survive without it. Crops wither. People are forced to sell or abandon their homesteads," Sophia finished. "There is more. My people have seen maps in their camp, places marked for dams, places where the river could be diverted." Swift Arrow's eyes darkened, "including the waters that feed our settlement." The implications chilled Sophia. This wasn't just criminal opportunity. It was systematic displacement of both settlers and native peoples. Control of water in the Colorado Territory meant control of life itself. "What of the boy?" Sophia asked. "One guard only, changed at midday. The child is bait to control his father, who stands against their water plans." Swift Arrow's expression grew troubled. "They will not keep him alive once the papers are signed." Sophia absorbed this information, and my mare, the chestnut one, fights them still. "The scarred man, Keller, comes himself to break its spirit this morning. He brings a special whip." Anger flared in Sophia's chest, but she suppressed it. Emotion clouded judgment, another lesson from her Ute mentors. "What does Running Elk suggest?" she asked, knowing the old man's tactical wisdom was legendary among his people. Swift Arrow smiled slightly. "He says the ghost should not fight 20 men. Instead, let 20 men fight each other." Sophia understood immediately. Create conflict within the ranks. "Their alliance is strong in appearance only," Swift Arrow continued. "The banker distrusts. The lawman. The territorial official fears exposure. The scarred one trusts no one." Swift Arrow reached into a small pouch at his waist. "Running Elk sends these." He handed Sophia several small items, a pouch of dried herbs, a tiny stoppered clay bottle, and what appeared to be a specially carved wooden whistle. The herbs create smoke that causes confusion when thrown on fire. The liquid induces sleep. When mixed with food or drink, the whistle, Swift Arrow demonstrated by blowing through it, producing no sound audible to human ears. Horses hear it, frightens them into panic. Sophia accepted the gifts with deep gratitude. Running Elk had always understood that victory came through intelligence rather than force, especially when outnumbered. "There is one more thing," Swift Arrow said, his voice lowering. "Our hunters found 2 men dead at Whispering Falls yesterday. Lawmen from the territorial capital. Their documents were taken. Keller covering his tracks," Sophia mused, "or eliminating potential opposition before this meeting." Swift Arrow nodded grimly. Some of our young men wish to attack directly. Running Elk prevents this, saying it would bring soldiers against our people, but he offers distraction when you need it. Sophia studied the camp below, her mind working through possibilities. The meeting begins at midday, when the sun stands tallest. Tell Running Elk I will act as the shadows lengthen when attention focuses on their papers and agreements. Sophia pointed to a distant rock formation, shaped like a broken fist. If your people could create a disturbance there, perhaps fire or smoke, it would draw attention and concern. Swift Arrow nodded. It will be done. And then I make use of their distraction. Sophia's eyes tracked to where Ember still resisted Keller's attempts to subdue her, the mare rearing and pulling away, evading the whip with intelligence that made her proud despite the dangerous situation. They believe their strength lies in numbers and weapons, Sophia said quietly. They forget that knowledge is the deadlier weapon. Swift Arrow rose to leave. Running Elk said you would understand. He paused. Also to remind you, the ghost does not fight the wind, she becomes it. As the young Ute warrior slipped away, Sophia returned her attention to the camp. The meeting preparations continued below, oblivious to her presence or the plans forming in her mind. Keller had finally given up his attempts with Ember for now, stalking away in visible frustration while the mare paced her enclosure. By sundown, Sophia promised herself both Ember and the boy would be free, and the carefully constructed criminal enterprise below would be facing justice it never expected, in the form of a legend they dismissed as mere frontier mythology. The sun climbed toward its zenith as activity intensified around the Broken Promise mine. Sophia observed from her concealed position as more dignitaries arrived. Men in expensive suits escorted by hired guns, territorial officials with document cases, even a judge whose reputation for corrupt rulings was well known throughout Colorado. This gathering went far beyond a simple criminal meeting. Keller had assembled the architects of a territorial power grab, using mining and water rights as the foundation for control. Such schemes had happened before in the expanding West. Whoever controlled water controlled everything else, from cattle to mining to transportation. Sophia's attention shifted to a new arrival, a military wagon under escort by 4 uniformed cavalry troopers. From it emerged a stern-faced officer whose insignia marked him as a colonel. His presence suggested army involvement, or at least the appearance of it, lending legitimacy to whatever transactions would occur. "Quite the coalition you've built, Keller," Sophia murmured, noting how each group maintained subtle distance from the others. Hired guns separate from territorial officials, bankers avoiding direct interaction with known outlaws, military keeping formal distance from all parties, united in purpose but divided by station and reputation. Such divisions could be exploited. As the meeting hour approached, Sophia made her way carefully around the perimeter of the camp, using natural cover and moving only when guards' attention was directed elsewhere. Her immediate goal was to reach the small stream that supplied the camp, which ran behind the kitchen tent where Hannah worked. If the Ute sleeping herbs were to be effective, they needed to enter the food or water supply before the midday meal. As she approached, Sophia spotted Hannah alone at the stream, filling water buckets. The opportunity was perfect, almost too perfect. Sophia hesitated, scanning for any sign of observation or trap. Seeing none, she slipped silently down to the water's edge. "Hannah," she whispered. The woman started, nearly dropping her bucket. "Saints preserve us. How did you—" She lowered her voice. "They're all here, important men from across the territory, signing papers that will ruin hundreds of settlers." "I need your help," Sophia said, revealing the small clay bottle. "This needs to go into the coffee for the meeting. It won't harm anyone, just induce drowsiness and confusion. Can you do it?" Hannah's eyes widened, then hardened with determination. "After what they did to my Edward? Gladly." She took the bottle, concealing it in her apron pocket. "The boy is still in the foreman's quarters. They've been keeping him drowsy. easier to control that way. This complicated matters. A drugged child would be harder to move quickly. Is he able to walk? Barely. They give him less during the day so he can eat. Hannah glanced nervously toward the kitchen tent. They'll be expecting me back. The meeting starts at noon, with a meal served after the main agreements are signed. Perfect timing, Sophia said. When do they check on Ember? The scarred one. Keller. He's obsessed with breaking that horse, goes himself every few hours, plans to try again after the meeting and says he needs the mare compliant before they move her to their main operation near the Utah border. Sophia processed this information. When the confusion starts, get to the boy if you can. There's an old mining trail behind the North Ridge. Head there. Ute allies will find you. Hannah nodded, then hesitated. There's something else you should know. The banker, Harrison, has papers showing foreclosure on your homestead. They're claiming legal ownership of everything you have, including Ember. Cold anger flared in Sophia's chest. On what grounds? Some debt your husband supposedly took before he died. The documents looked legitimate, territorial seal and everything. Forgeries, Sophia said flatly. Daniel left no debts. This is Keller creating a legal cover for theft. Hannah looked over her shoulder anxiously. I should go. They'll be suspicious. She started to rise, then added, one more thing. They've posted extra guards for the meeting. Some of Keller's best men are positioned as lookouts on the surrounding ridges. This was concerning news. Sophia had counted on most attention being focused on the meeting itself. How many? Where? 3 that I know of. North Ridge, East Approach, and overlooking the main trail. Hannah gathered her water buckets. Be careful. These men, they're not just outlaws. They truly believe they're building something that will make them the new power in the territory. As Hannah returned to the kitchen tent, Sophia retreated to higher ground. The additional lookouts complicated her plan, but didn't derail it. Years of tracking had taught her that overconfidence was often the downfall of otherwise careful men. The lookouts would be watching for obvious threats, posses, lawmen, rival gangs. Not a single woman moving like a ghost across terrain she knew, better than they ever could. Sophia circled toward the North Ridge, where the first lookout was positioned. Through her field glasses, she studied him. A professional gunman, judging by his gear and positioning, rifle resting on a natural rock formation that gave him clear sightlines to all approaches. What he didn't have was protection from above, using natural handholds in the rocky slope. Sophia climbed silently up the backside of the ridge. The Ute had taught her to test each hold before committing her weight, to blend her silhouette with natural formations, to time movements with gusts of wind that would mask any sound of displaced stones. The lookout never sensed her presence until Sophia's knife was at his throat. Not a sound, she whispered, as his body went rigid with shock. I have no desire to kill you unless forced. The man remained perfectly still, professional enough to recognize his disadvantage. Sophia relieved him of his weapons with practiced efficiency. Who are you? He managed, voice barely audible. Someone who wants her horse back. Sophia used strips, torn from the man's own bandana, to secure his hands and feet, then gagged him with the remainder. Your employers stole from the wrong woman. Using the lookout's own rope, she secured him to a boulder, positioned where he wouldn't be visible from below, but also wouldn't suffer exposure to the harsh mountain sun. Killing unnecessarily had never been the mountain ghost's way, even in her bounty hunting days. Taking the man's field glasses, Sophia surveyed the camp from her new vantage point. The meeting was gathering in the main building. Important men, taking seats around a large table spread with maps and documents. Keller himself stood at the head, his scarred face animated as he addressed the assembly. Though she couldn't hear his words, his gestures indicated grand plans and promises of prosperity. Sophia's gaze shifted to the corral where Ember was kept. The mare remained separate from other horses, still unbroken, despite Keller's earlier attempts. Even from this distance, she could see the proud arch of her neck, the defiant posture that had made her so valuable as breeding stock for her small homestead. The foreman's quarters, where James was held, had a single guard now, a man who repeatedly checked his timepiece, eager for the meeting to conclude so he could join the celebration that would undoubtedly follow. Through the field glasses, she spotted Hannah in the kitchen tent, directing other captive women in meal preparation. The woman's expression revealed nothing as she moved between cook fires and water barrels, but Sophia noted how she lingered slightly longer at the large coffee pot destined for the meeting room. Everything was aligning. The Ute herbs would take effect slowly, creating confusion rather than obvious symptoms. By the time the territorial officials realized something was wrong, Sophia would be moving on the second phase of her plan. She checked the position of the sun, nearly noon. The meeting would be starting, and with it the beginning of the end for Keller's operation. Sophia allowed herself a rare smile. The gang leader had spent years building his criminal empire, assembling political allies and creating the appearance of legitimacy. He'd never suspect that a widow tracking her stolen horse would be the catalyst for its destruction. The hunt that had begun with Ember's theft was about to become something far more significant: justice for an entire territory held hostage by corruption and greed. The midday sun beat down mercilessly as Sophia made her way toward the second lookout, position on the eastern ridge. Using the field glasses she'd taken from the first guard, she studied her target carefully, another professional positioned with a clear view of both the camp and the main approach from the territorial road. Unlike the first lookout, this man maintained constant movement, changing position every few minutes, a disciplined veteran taking his job seriously. Direct approach wouldn't work here. Sophia needed a different strategy. From her pouch, she retrieved the small wooden whistle Swift Arrow had provided. The Ute had long understood that what couldn't be accomplished through direct confrontation could often be achieved through misdirection. Sophia positioned herself carefully out of the lookout's direct line of sight, but within range of a small herd of elk grazing in a protected valley beyond the ridge. When the guard's attention shifted toward the camp, she brought the whistle to her lips and blew. Though silent to human ears, the effect on the elk was immediate. The herd leader's head shot up, ears pricked forward. Sophia blew again, the special frequency triggering the animal's instinctive alarm response. Within moments, the entire herd was in motion, wheeling and running in apparent panic. The lookout's attention snapped to the sudden movement. Through her field glasses, Sophia watched his posture change as he focused on the fleeing elk, clearly trying to determine what had spooked them. Predators? Rival gang? His rifle shifted, tracking the direction of the elk's flight. Sophia used his distraction to close the distance, moving from cover to cover with the fluid grace that had earned her legendary status. When merely 20 yards separated them, she employed another Ute trick, a small stone thrown precisely to create noise. In the opposite direction, the lookout spun toward the sound, providing Sophia the opening she needed. 3 swift strides brought her within range, and before the man could react, the butt of his own colleague's pistol struck precisely at the base of his skull. He crumpled without a sound. Sophia bound and gagged him as she had the first, positioning him out of the sun, but well concealed from any searching eyes. 2 lookouts neutralized, 1 remaining. As she prepared to move toward the third position, Sophia paused, noticing a change in the camp below. Men were emerging from the main building, their movement suggesting a recess in the meeting. Through the field glasses, she observed several of the territorial officials, looking distinctly unwell, rubbing their temples, accepting water from concerned aides, loosening collars in the heat. The sleeping herbs were beginning to take effect. The banker, Harrison, appeared particularly affected. leaning heavily on a younger assistant as he made his way to a shaded area. Even Keller seemed to be fighting discomfort, though his iron discipline kept his posture rigid as he conferred with the corrupt deputy marshal. Sophia allowed herself brief satisfaction before turning her attention to the final lookout. This one would be the most challenging, positioned directly overlooking the main trail with minimal cover for approach. But the growing confusion in the camp might provide the opportunity she needed. As she studied the situation, a flash of movement caught her attention. Hannah hurrying from the kitchen tent toward the foreman's quarters with a covered tray. The meeting's disruption had created an opportunity for her to check on the boy. Through the field glasses, Sophia watched Hannah speak briefly with the guard, who waved her through with minimal interest. The man's posture suggested he too was experiencing effects from the herbs, perhaps from a shared water barrel or earlier. Cup of coffee. The growing disorder was spreading faster than anticipated. Sophia needed to accelerate her timeline. A sharp whistle from distant rocks signaled that Swift Arrow's people were in position. The Ute would create their diversion when the sun touched a particular peak, perhaps 20 minutes from now. Sophia needed to neutralize the final lookout and be ready to move when that happened. She circled wide, approaching the lookout's position from behind and below, the direction least likely to be monitored. The terrain here was challenging, loose shale, threatening to announce her presence with every step. Sophia moved with exaggerated care, testing each placement before committing her weight. When she was within 30 yards, disaster nearly struck. A startled mountain hare burst from cover, freezing both Sophia and the lookout in momentary tableau. The man's rifle swung toward the disturbance, then tracked further as instinct warned him the rabbit itself wasn't the threat. Sophia remained absolutely motionless, her dun-colored clothing blending with the rocky terrain. The Ute had taught her that the human eye was drawn to movement more than shape or color. Even when looking directly at a stationary object, predator vision often failed to distinguish it from the background. Long seconds passed. The lookout's rifle barrel wavered, then gradually lowered as he dismissed the disturbance as wildlife. Sophia released a silent breath and resumed her careful approach. She was within striking distance when commotion erupted in the camp below. Through gaps in the rocks, she glimpsed men rushing from the main building, several doubled over in obvious distress. The herbs had taken full effect, striking some harder than others, depending on how much coffee they'd consumed. The lookouts, attention fixed completely on the chaos below, giving Sophia her opening. This time, she opted for a silent approach rather than confrontation, slipping behind the man and pressing the blade of her hunting knife against his kidney. "Don't move," she whispered. "My quarrel isn't with you unless you make it so." The man stiffened, but had the wisdom not to resist. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. "Do you have any idea who's down there?" "Corrupt officials, outlaws and thieves," Sophia replied, relieving him of his weapons. "Planning to steal water rights from honest settlers." Something in the man's posture changed. "You don't understand the situation." "I understand enough." Sophia used the man's own bandana to bind his hands. "Keller stole my horse and kidnapped a child to manipulate his father." The lookout went very still. "What child?" "The sheriff's son from Silver Creek, James." A tremor ran through the man's body that had nothing to do with fear. "How old?" "9, Sophia answered, suddenly wary of his reaction. "Blonde hair, blue eyes, small for his age." Sophia's knife pressed harder. "Who are you?" The man's voice dropped to a whisper. "Robert Wilson, U.S. Marshal Service. I've been undercover in Keller's operation for 2 months." Sophia's mind raced. A federal agent embedded this deeply would explain the man's professional bearing and distinctive tactics, but trusting him would be dangerous if he was lying. "The boy," Wilson continued urgently. "He's my nephew, my sister's son. I've been trying to locate him since they took him, but they've kept his location secret even from most of the gang." "Convenient claim," Sophia said, though doubt had crept into her certainty. "Inside the pocket of my vest," Wilson said. "Marshall's badge and documentation, letter from my sister with James's description." Keeping the knife steady, Sophia checked with her free hand. The badge was genuine. She'd seen enough to know the difference between territorial and federal issues. The letter, tear-stained and worn from repeated handling, matched the man's story. "If you're telling the truth," she said, "why are you looking outward instead of watching the camp?" "Because I signaled my backup before the meeting. 10 federal marshals are positioned beyond that ridge, waiting for my confirmation that all the targets are gathered." Wilson nodded toward a distant formation. "I was watching for their approach, not potential interference." This changed everything. If federal forces were already in position, Sophia's plan could dovetail with theirs, or interfere catastrophically. "The herbs," she said. "They're non-lethal, but half the men in that meeting won't be fit for arrest within the hour." Wilson's expression shifted between alarm and reluctant admiration. "That explains the sudden illness. What are you doing here?" With help, Catherine made a decision and cut his bonds. "We have perhaps 20 minutes before my Ute allies create a diversion on the North Ridge. I plan to use the confusion to free Ember and the boy. The Ute are with you." Wilson's professional assessment was visible in his eyes. "That changes the tactical situation significantly." He retrieved his weapons, as Sophia permitted, but made no threatening moves. "My men are waiting for a specific signal. Once given, they'll move in from multiple directions, but that won't happen for another hour." Sophia considered their options. "The situation in the camp is deteriorating faster than expected. Hannah, one of the women they've forced to work for them, is with James now. Keller and his core men aren't as affected by the herbs as the officials." Wilson nodded grimly. "Because they wouldn't be drinking with the territories. Too cautious." He checked his timepiece. "If your diversion happens in 20 minutes, and we can get James and your horse clear before then your operation can proceed as planned." "Without risk to the innocent," Sophia finished. For the first time, a hint of a smile touched Wilson's face. "I've heard stories about the mountain ghost. Never thought I'd be making common cause with a legend." "Save the flattery for when the boy is safe," Sophia replied, already focusing on their next moves. "We need to coordinate precisely if this is going to work." The situation in the camp deteriorated rapidly as Sophia and Wilson observed from their elevated position. Through field glasses, they watched several territorial officials being helped to wagons, clearly too ill to continue the meeting. The Banker Harrison appeared particularly afflicted, barely conscious as his aides carried him to his carriage. "The herbs work faster than I expected," Sophia murmured. "Fortunate for us," Wilson replied, his professional assessment evident as he surveyed the growing chaos. "Keller's inner circle seems largely unaffected." Indeed, Jacob Keller stood rigid with fury at the entrance to the main building, conferring intensely with the corrupt Deputy Marshal Rawlins and 3 of his most trusted men. Their gestures suggested suspicion rather than illness. "They're not drinking the coffee," Sophia observed. "They suspect something." Wilson nodded grimly. "Rawlins is too cautious to consume anything in mixed company. They'll be looking for sabotage." He checked his timepiece. "We have 15 minutes before your Ute diversion. What exactly should we expect?" "Smoke signals from the North Ridge, possibly controlled brush fires to draw attention. Nothing that would endanger the camp directly, but enough to split Keller's forces." Sophia focused on the foreman's quarters, where Hannah had not yet emerged. "I'm more concerned about the boy and Hannah now. If Keller suspects interference..." The words had barely left her mouth when a commotion erupted near the foreman's quarters. The guard who had admitted Hannah earlier now dragged her roughly into the open, shouting for Keller. Even at this distance, Sophia could see blood on Hannah's face from what appeared to be a vicious strike. "They've discovered her," Wilson said tensely, raising his field glasses. Sophia shifted her focus to the building's entrance, where a second guard emerged with James. The child seemed barely conscious, limbs uncoordinated, still affected by whatever. "Drugs they'd been giving him. We need to move now," she said, rising into a crouch. "The plan's compromised." Wilson's hand on her arm restrained her. "Wait, rushing in against those odds is suicide, even for the mountain ghost." Below, Keller stormed across the compound toward Hannah, his scarred face contorted with rage. The assembled gang members formed a rough circle as he confronted the woman who, despite her obvious fear, stood defiant. Though too distant to hear the exchange, Sophia read the body language clearly. Accusation, denial, escalating threat. When Keller struck Hannah hard enough to send her sprawling into the dust, Sophia's muscles tensed involuntarily. "I can't wait while he beats an innocent woman," she said, shrugging off Wilson's restraining hand. "You won't help her by dying," Wilson countered urgently. "Look at the broader situation." Sophia forced herself to assess the entire camp rather than focus solely on Hannah's plight. What she saw gave her pause. The chaos had created unexpected patterns of movement throughout the compound. Most of Keller's men were now concentrated near the confrontation, leaving other areas, specifically the corral where Ember was kept, with minimal supervision. Meanwhile, several of the territorial officials' wagons were already departing, their drivers eager to get their ailing masters away from what they likely perceived as some form of poisoning. This exodus was creating congestion on the main trail, blocking the planned escape route for some of Keller's forces. Most significant, the corrupt Deputy Marshal Rawlins was nowhere to be seen, having apparently slipped away during the confusion. "Rawlins is making a run for it," Wilson observed, confirming Sophia's assessment. "Rats deserting a sinking ship." The situation was evolving by the second. Hannah was now being restrained by two gang members, while Keller questioned her with increasing brutality. James had been handed off to a single guard who seemed uncertain where to take him in the midst of the chaos. "There," Sophia pointed, seeing their opportunity. "The guard with James is isolated, moving toward the storage shed, and only one man is watching Ember now." Wilson nodded, his tactical assessment aligning with hers. "We can time this with your ute diversion, but we need to move into position now." They descended swiftly from the ridge, using natural cover and the distraction of the central confrontation to approach the camp's perimeter undetected. Crouching behind abandoned mining equipment, they were close enough now to hear Keller's interrogation of Hannah. "Who helped you, woman?" he demanded, voice tight with controlled fury. "No settler's wife could have acquired such potent herbs. Was it the widow? Is she here?" Hannah's laugh was defiant, despite her bloodied face. "You're a fool, Jacob Keller. You steal from a legend and expect no consequences." The scarred leader struck her again. "The mountain ghost is a campfire story. To frighten children, nothing more." "Then why do you look over your shoulder when the wind changes?" Hannah taunted. "Why post triple lookouts if you fear no pursuit?" Sophia signaled to Wilson, pointing toward the storage shed where the guard had taken James. "The boy first," she whispered. "Then I'll get Ember." Wilson shook his head. "Together for both. I'll not leave you without backup in this viper's nest." Before Sophia could argue, a sharp cry of alarm came from the North Ridge. One of Keller's men was pointing urgently at three distinct columns of smoke now rising into the azure sky. "Apache signals!" someone shouted, triggering immediate panic among many of the gang members, particularly those familiar with frontier warfare. "Steady!" Keller roared, but his authority was already fractured as men rushed for weapons or horses. This was the diversion they'd been waiting for. As Keller's attention fixed on the distant smoke columns, Sophia and Wilson moved swiftly toward the storage shed. The guard stationed there was nervously watching the smoke rather than his prisoner, his rifle held carelessly as he craned his neck for a better view. Wilson took him with practiced efficiency, a swift blow to the base of the skull that rendered him unconscious without noise. Sophia was already inside the shed, finding James huddled in a corner, eyes wide with fear. "We're friends of your father," she whispered, kneeling beside him. "Your Uncle Robert is here to take you home." The boys' recognition of Wilson was immediate and profound. Despite his drugged state, he lunged into his uncle's arms with a strangled sob. "Can you walk?" Wilson asked urgently, checking the boy for injuries. "Think so," James slurred, struggling to coordinate his movements. "I'll carry him," Wilson decided, lifting the small body effortlessly. Ember next. Sophia nodded, leading the way back into the open air. The camp had descended into near chaos now, with men rushing in multiple directions, some preparing defenses against possible Indian attack, others clearly considering desertion as the situation deteriorated. Through the confusion, Sophia spotted Hannah still held by one guard, the other having been called away to help form a defensive line. Making a split-second decision, she changed course, approaching from the guard's blind side. The man never saw the blow coming, a precise strike to the nerve cluster at the base of his neck that dropped him instantly. Hannah staggered free, her face a mask of bruises but her eyes clear with determination. "The other woman?" Sophia asked tersely. "Already fled when the confusion started. North Trail, like you said." Wilson adjusted James's weight in his arms. "We need to move. Keller will re-establish control quickly. He's too experienced not to." Sophia nodded toward the corral where Ember was kept. "One more essential task." Ember's guard was already abandoning his post, drawn by Keller's shouted orders to form a defensive perimeter. The magnificent chestnut mare paced her enclosure restlessly, sensing the chaos and opportunity it presented. As they approached, the horse's ears pricked forward, recognizing Sophia immediately. She nickered softly, pressing against the rough-hewn gate. "Hello, old friend," Sophia whispered, working the simple latch mechanism. "Time to go home." The moment the gate swung open, Ember pushed through, circling Sophia once in evident joy before, standing perfectly positioned for her to mount. Despite the urgency of their situation, Wilson couldn't suppress a look of amazement. "I've never seen a horse respond like that," he admitted. "Like she understands everything." "She does," Sophia said simply, swinging onto Ember's bare back with practiced ease. She extended a hand to Hannah. "Can you ride double?" The battered woman nodded, accepting Sophia's help up behind her on the mare's broad back. Wilson, still carrying James, glanced toward the western edge of the camp. "My men will be waiting beyond those rocks," he said, indicating a formation in the distance. "If we can reach them, we'll have armed backup." There they are. The shout cut through the chaos as one of Keller's men spotted the escaping group. "The horse! They're taking the mare!" Sophia felt Ember tense beneath her, the mare understanding the danger as clearly as her human riders. "Go," she urged Wilson. "We'll draw their attention." The federal marshal hesitated, visibly torn between his duty to protect his nephew and his reluctance to leave Sophia and Hannah facing the brunt of pursuit. "Your men are waiting," Sophia reminded him sharply. "Get James to safety. We'll circle around and meet you." A gunshot cracked through the air, the bullet kicking up dust near Ember's hooves. Decision made for him. Wilson nodded grimly and sprinted toward the western rocks, clutching his nephew close to his chest. Sophia leaned forward over Ember's neck. "Show them why they couldn't break you," she whispered. The mare needed no further encouragement, leaping forward with explosive power that nearly unseated Hannah. Instead of heading directly after Wilson, Sophia guided Ember in a wide arc through the camp's eastern edge, deliberately drawing pursuit away from the marshal and his vulnerable charge. The strategy worked immediately. 6 riders mounted hastily, focusing entirely on the magnificent chestnut mare and its riders. "Hang on!" Sophia called over her shoulder to Hannah, who clutched desperately at her waist as Ember accelerated to a full gallop. Despite carrying double, the mare's legendary speed quickly opened distance between them and their pursuers. Keller's voice rose above the commotion, his fury evident even at a distance. 500 to whoever brings me that horse. Double for the women. Alive! The bounty energized the pursuit, more men rushing for mounts. Sophia guided Ember toward a narrow ravine that cut through the foothills east of the mine, a challenging route that would favor local knowledge over numbers. "They'll cut us off at Falcon Pass," Hannah warned, her voice strained from the punishing pace. "It's the only way through the ravine." "Not the only way," Sophia countered, directing Ember toward what appeared to be a solid rock wall. At the last possible moment, she guided the mare into a nearly invisible gap between towering boulders, a hidden trail known only to local Ute and those they trusted. The passage was barely wide enough for the horse, forcing both women to pull their legs tight against Ember's flanks. Behind them, shouts of confusion and anger marked the moment their pursuers lost visual contact. The hidden trail wound upward through increasingly rocky terrain, unsuitable for the direct pursuit of multiple riders. Sophia knew this would split Keller's forces, some following directly, others circling to cut them off where the trail eventually rejoined more open ground. "Where are we going?" Hannah gasped as Ember navigated the treacherous path with surprising confidence, her footing sure despite the loose shale and narrow passages. "Circle north, then west," Sophia explained, constantly, scanning for signs of pursuit. "Wilson's men will be at Broken Antler Ridge. If we can reach them before Keller regroups." A rifle shot echoed through the ravine, the bullet whining off stone well above their heads. Looking back, Sophia spotted 2 riders who had found the hidden trail entrance, their mounts struggling with the difficult terrain, but still advancing. "They're persistent," she muttered, urging Ember to greater speed where the trail briefly widened. Hannah's fingers dug painfully into Sophia's sides as the mare leapt a narrow fissure in the path. "Keller won't give up," she said between labored breaths. "Not on your horse and not on us. We know too much." "Let him come," Sophia replied, her focus narrowing to the immediate challenges of terrain and pursuit. The Ute had taught her that fear was natural but useless unless transformed into heightened awareness. The trail crested a rocky ridge before, descending sharply on the far side. Sophia reined Ember to a momentary halt, surveying the valley below. Dust clouds marked the movement of riders, Keller's men circling to intercept them. "At least 8 moving fast. They've split up to cut us off," Hannah observed, her voice steadier now despite her injuries. Sophia nodded, making quick calculations. The direct route to Broken Antler Ridge was clearly watched. They needed an alternative. As if responding to her thoughts, a distant whistle carried on the wind, 3 short notes followed by 1 long. The Ute signal for danger ahead. "Warning. Our friends to change course. Your people are still watching," Hannah said with wonder. "They've always watched these mountains," Sophia replied, scanning the ridgelines until she spotted a barely visible figure on a distant outcropping. The figure raised an arm, pointing northwest before disappearing from view. Sophia immediately understood. "Hold tight," she instructed Hannah, turning Ember toward a seemingly impossible cliff face. The mare balked momentarily before Sophia's gentle insistence convinced her to trust her rider's judgment. What appeared solid from a distance revealed itself as another hidden trail, this one even narrower and steeper, switching back on itself repeatedly as it descended into a canyon not visible from their previous position. "Thunder Canyon," Hannah whispered, recognition and fear mingling in her voice. "The flood path." The canyon was notorious among locals, a deadly channel when sudden storms sent walls of water cascading through its narrow confines. even now. In dry weather, the evidence of past floods was visible in debris caught high on the rock walls and the smooth, scoured stone beneath Ember's hooves. "No one will follow us here," Sophia confirmed. "Too dangerous for those who don't know it intimately." The canyon wound like a serpent through the mountains, its high walls blocking direct sunlight and muffling distant sounds of pursuit. Ember moved with careful precision, her trust in Sophia evident with every step. After 15 minutes of tense progress, the canyon began to widen, its western wall gradually lowering until they could see across the broader landscape. In the distance, Broken Antler Ridge stood sentinel against the sky, named for its distinctive formation resembling a buck's shattered antlers. "I see riders," Hannah reported, straining to make out details. "At least a dozen near the ridge." Sophia nodded, her keen eyes confirming Hannah's count. Wilson's men based on their positioning. Defensive formation, not pursuit grouping. The canyon soon opened into a broad wash, allowing Ember to resume a faster pace. They were still several miles from the ridge, crossing exposed terrain that left them vulnerable to observation from multiple vantage points. The sudden crack of rifles confirmed Sophia's concerns. 3 riders had emerged from a side canyon. To their right, cutting loose with long-range fire, more intended to slow than to hit at such distance. "Hang on!" Sophia called, urging Ember to her full gallop. The mare responded magnificently, stretching out across the rough terrain with ground-devouring strides that no ordinary horse could match. The pursuing riders fell behind rapidly, but more appeared ahead, a group of 5 emerging from behind a low rise, forming a line to block their path to the ridge. "We're caught between them," Hannah cried. Her momentary optimism fading, Sophia assessed their options with the cold clarity that had made her legendary. Direct confrontation against armed men would be suicidal. Turning back would mean facing the 3 pursuers behind them. The only remaining choice was to break through the line ahead, a desperate gamble with poor odds. As she weighed these grim alternatives, movement on their left flank caught her attention. Riders approaching, fast. But they moved differently, with the fluid grace of horsemen who seemed part of their mounts rather than separate entities. Ute, Sophia realized aloud, recognizing the distinctive riding style of her adoptive people. 5 warriors, faces painted. For battle, curved toward their position from the northern hills. The lead rider, a young man Sophia recognized as Running Elk's nephew, made the sign for follow before changing course to intercept the Keller men ahead. "What are they doing?" Hannah asked, confusion evident in her voice. "Creating an opening," Sophia explained, adjusting Ember's direction to follow the Ute lead. The strategy became clear as the Ute riders charged directly toward Keller's blocking line. Their sudden appearance from unexpected quarters caused momentary confusion. At the last possible moment, the warriors split into 2 groups, circling the outlaws in a classic harassment pattern. No shots were fired. The Ute were careful to stay out of effective range while creating maximum disruption. The tactic worked perfectly, pulling the outlaws out of position as they tried to respond to threats from multiple directions. "Now," Sophia urged, driving Ember straight toward the gap that had opened in the blockade. The mare sensed the critical moment, gathering herself for a burst of speed that seemed impossible after the grueling chase. They flashed through the broken line before Keller's men could reorganize. Hoofbeats thundering across the hard-packed earth as they raced toward the distant ridge where Wilson's federal forces waited. Behind them, frustrated shouts and scattered gunfire marked the outlaws' realization that their quarry had slipped through. The Ute riders were already disappearing into the landscape, their diversionary mission accomplished without a single shot fired in return. "We might make it," Hannah breathed, hope returning to her voice as they closed the distance to Broken Antler Ridge. Sophia remained focused, knowing the danger was far from past. Keller himself is still out there, she warned, and he won't give up easily. As if summoned by her words, a lone rider appeared on a rise to their right, too distant to identify visually, but Sophia felt a chill of recognition nonetheless. The figure sat motionless, watching their flight toward federal protection. Jacob Keller had joined the hunt personally. The lone figure on the rise remained motionless as Sophia drove Ember toward the federal position at Broken Antler Ridge. Though too distant to make out facial features, the rigid posture and distinctive silhouette left no doubt. Jacob Keller was watching their flight toward safety, calculating, planning. "Why isn't he pursuing?" Hannah asked nervously, glancing back as they put more distance between themselves. "And the solitary rider? Because he's smarter than his men," Sophia replied grimly. "He knows Ember can outrun anything in the territory in a straight chase. He's looking for another angle." The realization hit her with sudden clarity. "He's going to cut around to intercept us before we reach the marshals." Sophia studied the terrain ahead, mentally mapping the fastest routes. If Keller took the game trail through Serpent Pass, he could potentially reach the western approach to Broken Antler Ridge before they did. The direct route would bring Sophia and Hannah to the ridge from the south, where open ground made them vulnerable to ambush. "We need to change course," she decided, guiding Ember northward toward rougher terrain. "Take the high approach instead." Hannah tightened her grip as the mare responded to Sophia's guidance, shifting direction to tackle a steeper, rockier ascent. "Won't that slow us down?" "Yes, but it'll force Keller to choose. Either follow us into territory where Ember has the advantage, or stick to his original plan and risk missing us entirely." The strategy required perfect timing. Too slow and Keller could adjust his course to intercept them along the new route. Too fast, and they might run headlong into any outlaws still positioned between them and the federal forces. Ember attacked the slope with determined strength, her powerful hindquarters driving upward despite the fatigue of carrying double for miles across challenging terrain. Sophia felt a moment of fierce pride in the mare's heart and intelligence. No ordinary horse would have endured what she had since her theft, still performing with such extraordinary capability. When they crested the slope, Sophia reined Ember to a brief halt, surveying the landscape from this elevated position. She could see Wilson's men at Broken Antler Ridge, their defensive formation visible even at this distance. More importantly, she spotted movement to the west. Keller had indeed taken Serpent Pass, riding hard to position himself before they could reach safety. "He's alone," Sophia observed, her eyes narrowing. "Where are the rest of his men?" Hannah scanned the terrain. "There, to the east, at least 5 riders circling to cut us off from behind. And 3 more approaching from the south," Sophia added, pointing to dust clouds visible against the lowering afternoon sun. "They're trying to form a net." The moment of observation had cost precious seconds. Sophia urged Ember forward again, angling northeastward along the ridgeline. This route would add distance but offered better visibility and fewer places for ambush. "The marshals have spotted us," Hannah reported, seeing movement among the federal group ahead. Indeed, several riders had broken from the main formation, moving to provide cover for their approach. Wilson was likely among them, having delivered James to safety and now returning to assist their escape. Ember's pace remained strong despite her exertion, the mare somehow sensing the importance of reaching those distant figures. The ridge narrowed as they progressed, eventually becoming a natural bridge of stone connecting 2 higher formations. This passage offered the advantage of protection from gunfire on either side, but created a potential bottleneck if blocked. Sophia's instincts prickled as they approached the narrowest section. Something felt wrong. The positioning of Keller's scattered forces, the absence of pursuit directly behind them. The outlaw leader was too experienced to waste manpower on obviously failed approaches. She reined Ember to a sudden stop just short of the stone bridge, scanning the terrain with heightened awareness. Nothing moved, nothing seemed out of place, yet her intuition screamed warning. Then she saw it, the faintest glint of sunlight on metal from a crevice near the far end of the bridge. Someone lay hidden there, waiting. "Ambush," she whispered, immediately backing Ember away from the exposed position. "How did he get ahead of us?" Hannah asked, her voice taut with renewed fear. "He didn't. It's not Keller." Sophia studied the position, noting the perfect field of fire it offered. One of his best men stationed there earlier as fallback protection. "For their meeting. We just happened to choose the same escape route. This complicated matters significantly. The hidden gunman could hold the position indefinitely, effectively blocking their most direct path to safety. Attempting to cross the stone bridge would make them perfect targets." "Could we go around?" Hannah suggested, looking for alternative routes. Sophia assessed the options rapidly. Going back would mean facing the riders closing from behind. Descending to either side would slow them dramatically, while exposing them to fire from multiple directions. Forward was the only viable choice, but the bridge seemed impassable with the gunman in position. A distant whistle drew Sophia's attention, one of Wilson's marshals signaling that they'd spotted the ambush as well. She responded with a quick wave, acknowledging their awareness of the situation. As if triggered by this exchange, a rifle shot cracked from the hidden position, the bullet whining harmlessly overhead. A warning rather than a serious attempt to hit them at this range. "He's getting nervous," Sophia observed. "Wants us to retreat toward the others." The tactical problem seemed insoluble until Sophia noticed Ember's ears flicking rhythmically toward the north. Following her focus, she spotted movement among the rocks above and beyond the bridge. Subtle shifts that most would miss entirely. Ute warriors moving into position with their characteristic stealth. Understanding bloomed in Sophia's mind. Running Elk's people weren't just providing diversions, they were actively clearing their escape route. The hidden gunman was about to receive an unwelcome surprise. "Be ready," she told Hannah quietly. "When I say now, hold tight and don't look back." The seconds stretched as Sophia waited for the perfect moment. Another shot from the hidden gunman, this one closer, but still meant to intimidate rather than eliminate. He was growing more anxious as the marshals gradually approached from the other direction. Then it happened. A small cascade of pebbles from above the gunman's position, deliberately triggered by unseen hands. The hidden figure's attention inevitably shifted upward for a critical second. "Now," Sophia urged. Ember launched into full gallop with explosive power. They thundered onto the stone bridge, hooves striking sparks from the rocky surface as they charged directly toward the hidden threat. The ambusher recovered quickly, swinging his rifle back toward the approaching riders. But before he could fire, a small object arced down from the rocks above, an Ute hunting bowler that wrapped around the rifle barrel with devastating accuracy, spoiling his aim as he pulled the trigger. The shot went wild as Sophia and Hannah flashed past the disrupted ambush position. A brief glimpse revealed the gunman struggling with both the entangled weapon and an apparent decision about whether to draw his sidearm or retreat from the unseen threat above. He chose retreat, scrambling backward from his position just as more stones clattered down from the heights, the Ute making their presence felt without directly engaging. Once across the bridge, Sophia guided Ember onto a broader trail leading directly toward the approaching marshals. The distance closed rapidly, federal badges now visible on the chests of the men riding to intercept them. "We're going to make it," Hannah breathed, her death grip on Sophia's waist finally relaxing slightly. Sophia remained vigilant, scanning for further threats. Not safe yet. Keller's still out there. As if summoned by her words, a lone rider appeared on a perpendicular trail ahead. Jacob Keller himself, positioned to make one final attempt at interception before they reached federal protection. Some scarred outlaw leader sat his mount with cold determination, rifle raised but not yet firing, waiting for them to reach optimal range. The cruel calculation was clear. He preferred recapturing them, but would kill rather than lose them too. "The marshals! Magnificent," Hannah whispered, genuine awe in her voice, as Ember carried them towards safety with her own intelligence and courage. The federal marshals spread out in a covering formation as Sophia and Ember crossed the final stretch of open ground. Keller, recognizing the futility of continued pursuit against mounting odds, wheeled his horse around and galloped away toward distant hills. Wilson himself rode at the front of the marshal contingent, his face breaking into a relieved smile as they finally reached federal protection. "I was beginning to think you decided to handle Keller's entire gang by yourself," he called, as they slowed to join the marshals. Sophia allowed herself the briefest smile in return. The thought crossed my mind. Ember stood steaming in the afternoon heat, her chestnut coat glistening with sweat, but her head held high despite the ordeal she'd endured. Wilson had guided the group to a defensible position among the broken antler rocks, where 10 federal marshals maintained a vigilant perimeter against potential pursuit. Sophia dismounted with less than her usual grace, the exhaustion of the past days finally catching up to her. Hannah needed assistance from 2 marshals, her injuries and fatigue making independent movement difficult. "James?" Sophia asked immediately, scanning the gathered men. "Safe," Wilson assured her, gesturing toward a natural alcove where the boy rested on a bedroll wrapped in a marshal's coat. "Doctors already checked him. The drugs they gave him are wearing off. He'll make a full recovery." Relief washed through Sophia. One innocent life secured, at least. The other woman Hannah mentioned, "We found her on the North Trail, just as you predicted. Already sent her to Silver Creek with an escort. She'll be safe there until she can be reunited with any surviving family." Sophia nodded, giving Ember a grateful pat as a marshal brought water for the exhausted mare. "What about Keller and his operation?" Wilson's face hardened. "That's our next order of business. We've been building a case against him for months, but today's gathering gave us everything we needed. Territorial officials accepting bribes, bankers involved in land fraud, military supplies being diverted, all documented by our agents." He gestured to a marshal unpacking field glasses and ammunition. "Anderson here has been undercover as one of Keller's hired guns for nearly 6 months, gathering evidence. Your disruption of their meeting was actually perfectly timed. Created confusion just as we were preparing to move in." "Speaking of which," Sophia said, "when exactly are you moving on the camp?" "Keller's men will be scattering now that they know something's wrong." "Already happening," Wilson replied with quiet satisfaction. "While I was bringing these men to secure your escape, the main force, 20 additional marshals, approached. The broken promise from the south. They should be in position now." As if confirming his words, the distant crack of gunfire echoed across the landscape. Multiple shots followed by a thunderous explosion that suggested a significant confrontation underway. "Sounds like they've engaged," one of the marshals observed, checking his timepiece. "Right on schedule." Sophia's brow furrowed as she studied the distant dust clouds rising from the direction of the abandoned mine. "Keller won't be there," she said with certainty. "He was pursuing us personally, and when that failed, he headed northwest, away from the camp." Wilson nodded grimly. "I expected as much. He's too canny to be caught in a collapsing operation. Probably has escape caches and fresh horses staged across the territory." You're not pursuing him?" Sophia asked, surprised. "Oh, we will," Wilson assured her. "But first we need to dismantle his organization completely. Cut off his resources, his men, his political protection. A man like Keller can't operate alone. His power comes from the network he's built." Sophia understood the strategy. Isolate the predator from his pack before moving in for the final confrontation. The Ute used similar tactics when dealing with renegade warriors too dangerous to approach directly. Hannah approached, moving stiffly but with determination despite her injuries. A marshal had provided basic medical attention, cleaning the worst of her cuts and providing a canteen of fresh water. "The documents," she said without preamble. "The water rights contracts, land grants, banking records, they're the key to everything. If Keller escapes with those papers, he could restart elsewhere." Wilson's expression sharpened. "What documents?" "Specifically, in the main office building," Hannah explained, "a leather portfolio with the territorial seal. It contains falsified deeds, forged water rights, and banking authorizations with official signatures, some genuine, others forged. They were preparing to file them after today's meeting." Sophia's eyes met Wilson's, both recognizing the critical importance of these documents. "If your men don't know to look for them specifically," she warned, "they might be overlooked in the confusion." Wilson turned to his second in command. "Peterson, take 4 men and ride to reinforce the main group. Make sure they secure any and all documents in that camp, especially anything with official seals or signatures." The marshal nodded, immediately selecting men for the mission. As they prepared to depart, Sophia noticed a figure materializing. From the rocks nearby, a Ute warrior moving with such natural stealth that even the trained marshals hadn't detected his approach. "Swift Arrow," she acknowledged, recognizing Running Elk's son. The other marshals tensed, hands moving toward weapons until Wilson signaled them to stand down. Swift Arrow ignored the marshals, addressing Sophia directly in the Ute tongue. "The scarred man does not return to his camp. He rides east with 2 others carrying saddlebags heavy with papers." Sophia translated for Wilson, whose expression darkened. "He's already secured the documents. Must have had them with him when he joined the pursuit." "Which direction exactly?" Sophia asked Swift Arrow in Ute. "The eastern trail toward Eagle Mountain," came the reply, "but they will circle north when they believe it is safe. 3 caches of fresh horses have been prepared along that route." When Sophia relayed this information, Wilson immediately began reorganizing his forces. "Peterson, change of plans. Take 6 men and cut across to intercept at Widow's Pass. It's the only viable route north from Eagle Mountain. The rest of us will pursue directly to keep pressure on them." Peterson and his selected men departed immediately, riding hard to reach the pass before Keller could arrive. Wilson turned to Sophia, his expression serious. "You've done more than enough. You and Ember should rest here while we handle the pursuit." Sophia shook her head. "Keller came to my homestead specifically. He knows who I am from our past encounter, and he took Ember deliberately. This isn't finished for me until he's brought to justice." Wilson studied her for a long moment, professional assessment mixing with growing respect. "The territory's stories about the mountain ghost didn't do you justice," he finally said. "But Ember's exhausted from carrying double through that chase. Even a horse of her quality has limits." "I'll go alone," Sophia decided, checking her knife and the pistol Wilson had provided earlier. On foot, several of the marshals exchanged skeptical glances, but Swift Arrow nodded with understanding. "The ghost walks faster than horses through the rocks," he said in Ute. "I will guide her on paths the white men cannot follow." Sophia turned to Hannah. "Stay with James and the marshals. You'll be safe here." Hannah surprised her by stepping forward and grasping her hands. "My Edward would still be alive if the law had stopped Keller sooner." "Bring him to justice, Mountain." "Ghost." Wilson clearly wanted to object, but recognized the determination in Sophia's expression. "At least take this," he said, offering a Winchester repeating rifle. "Swift Arrow can lead you to intercept, but you shouldn't face Keller unarmed." Sophia accepted the weapon, checking its action with practiced ease. "We'll drive him toward your men at Widow's Pass. He won't escape justice this time." Swift Arrow had already melted back into the rocks, preparing for their departure. Sophia knelt briefly beside Ember, resting her forehead against the mare's sweat-dampened neck. "Rest, old friend," she murmured. "You've earned it." The mare nudged her gently, intelligent eyes seeming to understand the unfinished business that drew her away. One of the younger marshals had already begun tending to her, removing trail dust with careful hands and providing fresh water. Wilson organized the remaining marshals, preparing to pursue Keller along the main trails, while Sophia and Swift Arrow took the hidden Ute routes. As they mounted up, he called to Sophia one last time. "The stories say the mountain ghost could outrun mounted men across the harshest terrain," he said, half questioning, half confirming. Sophia's smile was brief but genuine. "Guess we'll find out if the stories are true." As the marshals rode east, in disciplined formation, Sophia turned to follow Swift Arrow into the maze of rocks and hidden trails that would become their hunting ground. The Ute moved at a pace that would have exhausted ordinary travelers, but Sophia matched him stride for stride, her specially designed moccasin boots finding purchase on surfaces that seemed impossible to navigate. The hunt that had begun with Ember's theft was approaching its conclusion. This time, the predator had become the prey. The mountains had taught Sophia patience, endurance, and the cold certainty of justice. Jacob Keller was about to learn why even the most hardened outlaws had once spoken her name with fear. The mountain. Ghost was more than a legend. She was vengeance in human form, a debt 15 years in the making, and no man, no matter how powerful his allies or elaborate his schemes, could outrun his past forever. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.